time. Some of you have already got layoff notices. Others are worried you might face them in the future. You're scared. You're stressed. You don't know what's going to happen. I want you to know that Canadians are with you. We will fight for your jobs, and we will make sure the supports are there in the event of layoff. We'll make sure that EI provides payment promptly to help you keep food on the table, and we will work to get you back into a paycheck as soon as possible. And I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people? These are great Canadian people. American workers, just like them, are going to lose jobs if this continuing trade war insanity goes on. There is no good reason to do this to these good people. Stop the tariffs, stop the chaos, let's solve this problem, and that will mean that workers on both sides of the border can get their lives back, and both the nations could be stronger, safer, and more secure. We will always be a sovereign, independent nation. We will never be the 51st state. We will always be proudly Canadian, and we will fight for the Canadian promise. I go further to say that that Canadian promise has always been the reason for my political career. We want this to be a country where hard work means anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that a hardworking person gets a great life on a safe street and a beautiful house under our proud flag. But that promise is broken after 10 years of the Trudeau-Carney Liberals. The lost Liberal decade has seen, over the last 7 years, $500 billion of investment leave our country for the U.S. Our per capita GDP has been the worst growth among all of our competitors. Housing costs have doubled and gone up faster than in any other G7 country. And now the Liberals think they should be rewarded with a fourth term in office. Furthermore, they brought in a carbon tax in this law. This law is still in place, even though Mr. Carney has signed a fake executive order to hide the tax for 35 or 40 days leading up to the election. It is still in place, and it applies across the board. The tax is scheduled to go up 300% over the next 5 years, and hiding it for a few weeks will not change that. Furthermore, the full carbon tax also applies to industries like those here at Iveco. Iveco makes hot-rolled steel wire and steel billets, and these taxes drive up the cost of the entire domestic steel industry. Mr. Carney has said that he wants to expand the industrial carbon tax beyond the already eye-watering increases the government has passed into law. He specifically singled out steel in an interview he did on CTV. He said that Canadians don't buy steel, they don't need steel, and therefore it won't do any harm to tax steel. Although he did admit that the tax would drive up the cost of an automobile by just $200. I don't think anybody believes that. Remember when the Liberals told us that the earlier carbon tax wouldn't cost you anything? We learned later that that was not true. Carney's proposed shadow carbon tax will be bigger than Trudeau's carbon tax. And it's ultimately a trick. Hide the tax before the election and then bring it back bigger than ever after the election. This was a bad idea before the Trump tariffs. But now that Trump is hitting Canadian industry with a massive tariff, Carney is saying that he will impose a massive carbon tax on Canadian businesses. The combination of Trump's tariffs and Carney's carbon taxes would be a disaster for the workers behind me. Workers would lose wages, consumers would pay more. Money and jobs would leave Canada, making us even more dependent on the Americans, just like Trump wants. It reminds us of Carney's decision to move his headquarters out of Canada to the U.S. This new tax would apply to lumber mills, steel mills, factories, aluminum plants, and they would in many cases simply leave. But I won't let that happen. Today I am announcing that a common-sense, Canada First Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces impose industrial taxes. There will be no taxes on consumers, no taxes on Canadian industries. Instead, Provinces will continue to have the freedom to address this issue how they like, but there will be no federal obligation to impose the tax. We will also axe the tax on steel, aluminum, natural gas, food production, concrete, and other industries. Instead of taxes, we will use technology. Technology, not taxes, is the best way to fight climate change and protect our environment. While the Liberals tax businesses who use energy, Conservatives will cut taxes and boost incentives for those who bring down emissions. Carrot, not stick. We will expand eligibility for the clean technology and clean manufacturing investment tax credits. We will reward heavy industries who make products with lower emissions than the world average. For example, Canada's industry produces 2 tons of greenhouse gases for every 1 ton of aluminum. China produces 12 tons of emissions for every 1 ton of aluminum, 6 times more. So every time you bring production from China back to Canada, you actually reduce emissions on a global scale. And I see there's some pigeons up there giving me a round of applause or something, flapping their wings, but a little bit distracting, but still no less. If you don't laugh, you cry in this world. Cutting taxes on clean production will bring jobs and production home and bring global emissions down. We will do this to restore our industrial base and take back control of our economy from the Americans. It'll be part of my Bring It Home tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building. This plan will lower income tax, investment tax. We will axe the sales tax on new homes to save you up to $50,000 on the purchase of a new house. We'll lower taxes to unleash massive booms in our different sectors to bring home paychecks and productions. Our mines, factories, mills will be buzzing with work for our welders, carpenters, pipe fitters, heavy machinery operators, assembly line workers, sheet metal workers. They will be making more by making more. We will be a strong, self-reliant, and sovereign nation standing on our own feet and standing up to the Americans. We will reward work, unleash entrepreneurs, harvest resources, make our own goods, trade with each other, build homes for our youth, rebuild our borders and military, honor our history, and raise our flag. What binds us together is the Canadian promise that anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, that hard work gets you a great life in a beautiful home, on a safe street, protected by solid borders and brave troops under a proud flag. What we must do now is to preserve that flag and its promise by working together, fighting together, and winning together. That is what it means to put Canada first. Let's bring it home. Thank you.
We'll now take questions from the floor. Please indicate your name and your outlet.
My name is James Morgan. I'm from the Review newspaper nearby here in Vankleek Hill. I know many of the people standing behind you, sir, may even live in this community and read our paper. But anyway, I appreciate your commitment and your statements on economic sovereignty and approaching this tariff situation from that. Do you have any ideas, though, on cultural sovereignty to strengthen that, to complement the ideas on economics? I'm thinking of things like continued support for local journalism or local broadcasting.
Yes, we are strong supporters of local journalism and local media, and we will make sure that, for example, local media, independent outlets get their fair share of government advertising. I also think we need a renewed commitment to celebrating our heritage and our identity. Over the last 10 years, there's been a tendency to tear down our statues, change the names of different public monuments in order to cancel our history. I think that has weakened the bonds that used to tie us together. I believe that we should celebrate our history. We should honor our first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, without whom we would not have a Canada today. His vision of an East-West nation is really now more than ever needed. So we will be naming public monuments after him and many of our other historical figures. We will put a renewed focus on celebrating the military history, the extremely proud military history that we have over a century of defending freedom at home and around the world. We will ensure that our young people have chances to participate in that history by expanding, for example, the Cadet Corps and other programs that bring our people together from coast to coast to coast to coast. We now more than ever, we have to celebrate our proud heritage and our common Canadian identity. That's what unites us. Let's bring it home. Thank you.
Next question.
This is Joe Coppolino from the Tribune Express Carillon, a local paper here. Following up on James's question, you've said that you want to get rid of the local journalism initiative, which is super important for our paper ourselves, particularly in this region where we are a bilingual paper, one of the few in the country and in the province and in the country. That program basically keeps us alive, particularly as businesses in this area begin to struggle, and I expect that they're going to struggle more in the coming years, regardless of which government comes on, given the economic opportunity outset landscape. What ways will a government support local journalism outside of the Local Journalism Initiative program, which helps fund many of the journalists in this area?
Thank you. Well, I have raised concerns with how the government has run that program and other media support programs, my platform will have measures that will strengthen local and independent journalism and give actually better and stronger voices to local journalism than we even have right now. So you'll have to stay tuned for that platform. We're just getting started. There's another roughly 6 weeks, and you'll be seeing a lot more from me, and I think you'll like what you have to see about local journalism.
En français, sur le journalisme.
En français.
J'ai critiqué la manière de laquelle le gouvernement libéral gérait des programmes de subvention aux médias. C'est trop politisé et leur approche ne permet pas l'indépendance dont on a besoin dans une démocratie libre. En même temps, il nous faut supporter les médias dans les communautés, les médias indépendants. Et vous allez voir dans mon plateforme électorale des engagements pour favoriser les médias comme le vôtre dans les communautés, les médias communautaires dont on a besoin pour partager les histoires de notre pays. Merci beaucoup.
Next question.
Merci. Bonjour, M. Poilievre, Olivier Ferro-Boissé de TVA.
Bonjour.
Monsieur Carney, Mark Carney est en Europe aujourd'hui. Est-ce que dans le contexte, il aurait dû se rendre aux États-Unis d'abord? Et est-ce que vous exigeriez une démonstration de respect envers notre souveraineté avant d'aller rencontrer Donald Trump à Washington?
Donc, il y a deux questions. L'une, c'est des réunions en Europe. J'ai rien contre les réunions. Évidemment, des chefs gouvernementaux doivent se réunir à travers le monde. Les chefs de gouvernement doivent rencontrer des chefs d'État, etc. Mais on a 10 ans des réunions sans action. Par exemple, si on veut diversifier nos exports vers l'Europe, il faut approuver des pipelines, des usines de gaz liquéfié, élargir nos ports. Parce que maintenant, on n'a pas les moyens de faire acheminer nos produits vers l'Europe. Et le fait que M. Carney et Trudeau ont bloqué Énergie Est, GNL Québec, les projets de GNL dans les Maritimes et à Terre-Neuve, ça a nous rendu beaucoup plus dépendants sur les États-Unis. J'aurais aimé que M. Carney annonce aujourd'hui qu'il a une entente pour vendre le gaz naturel en France. La France a signé une entente d'approvisionnement de gaz naturel avec Qatar. Pourquoi Qatar? Pourquoi pas Canada? On partage des racines avec la France. On est un allié démocratique avec la France. Pourquoi est-ce que les libéraux veulent que les emplois vont à Qatar et non pas au Canada? On a 1 billion pieds cubes de gaz naturel ici au Canada. Mais 100% de nos exportations vont aux États-Unis à cause du fait qu'on n'a pas des usines de liquéfaction. Donc, il faut rapidement abroger la loi C-69, approuver GNL Québec, approuver des usines de gaz naturel et des pipelines pour acheminer notre énergie vers l'Atlantique et commencer vraiment à briser notre dépendance sur les États-Unis. pour nous mettre dans une position de contrôle de nous-mêmes. Nous devons être maîtres chez nous. Par rapport au président Trump, il doit reconnaître, respecter notre souveraineté et notre indépendance. Arrêtez de nous insulter et arrêtez avec des tarifs non provoqués et injustifiables. C'est ça le message que j'envoie au président Trump et c'est le message que je vais, après les élections, avec l'appui des Canadiens, je vais envoyer directement au président. Merci.
In English, please.
So there were two parts to the question. One is about the Prime Minister holding meetings with leaders in Europe. Obviously, Prime Ministers have to meet foreign leaders in France, the United Kingdom, and all over the world. But meetings alone will not diversify our trade. We have a decade of nonstop international meetings, yet the share of our trade that goes, our exports that go to France and the UK has not budged. Why? Because we cannot get our products over the Atlantic. The Trudeau-Carney Liberals have blocked pipelines, LNG plants, mines, and other infrastructure that is needed to get our products over the Atlantic to the Europeans. I give you the example of France. France signed a natural gas supply agreement with Qatar. We could be selling that gas. We have 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right beneath our feet. We have cold weather, as you're experiencing today, which makes it cheaper to liquefy the gas. We have clean hydroelectricity to power that liquefaction. The steel from places like this could go in an LNG plant, or in, I should say, dozens of LNG plants right across the East Coast and the West Coast and the Saguenay region. So why don't we repeal C-69, the No New Pipelines law, rapidly approve LNG plants, pipelines, mines, port expansions, so that we don't have to sell 100% of our natural gas exports to the Americans. I would have liked to seen Mr. Carney come home with a natural gas supply agreement signed with the French, the way the Qataris have done. We know they need our gas. Japan, Greece, Germany, France, and other countries, Ukraine, have all asked for our natural gas. But the radical net zero, keep it in the ground ideology that has guided the Carney-Trudeau Liberals for 10 years and caused the lost decade has prevented us from doing it. After a lost decade, we don't need to give the Liberals a fourth term. What we need is a real change to bring home paychecks and production and put Canada first.
This will be the last question.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. This is Kate McKenna from CBC News. Are you prepared to commit Canada to any kind of emissions target if you become Prime Minister? And if so, what would that look like?
We have to focus on technology and not taxes. First and foremost, we have to take back control of our economy. What would my emissions target look like? I treat this as a global problem. By bringing home production from more polluting foreign jurisdictions, we reduce global emissions while growing our own paychecks. I don't think it is an achievement to shut down a Canadian steel mill and then see one open up in China that produces 10 or 20 times more emissions for each unit of steel. What we need to do is acknowledge that the best way to reduce emissions is to bring home clean production here. For example, National Bank has calculated that we could displace 2.5 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions in India if we would supply them with our clean Canadian natural gas rather than having them power their economy with coal. 2.5 billion tons is 3 times the emissions of all of Canada. It makes more sense to bring emissions down by bringing jobs home through technology and not taxes. And that's what I announced today.
En français.
Merci beaucoup. La question, c'était par rapport à comment je vois les cibles pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Je le vois à l'échelle globale. Une tonne d'émissions dans l'atmosphère qui proviennent de la Chine, les États-Unis ou l'Inde est aussi important qu'une tonne qui provient au Canada. Donc, si on ferme une usine d'acier ici au Canada et c'est remplacé avec une autre en Chine où il n'y a pas de normes environnementales, ça rend la situation encore pire. Donc, en ramenant la production ici au Canada, nous réduisons les émissions à travers le monde. Je vous donne l'exemple des exportations de gaz naturel. La Banque nationale a calculé que si on fournit le gaz naturel à l'Inde pour déplacer le charbon en production d'électricité, ça va réduire les émissions de 2,5 billions, 2,5 trillions de tonnes d'émissions qui vont permettre de réduire à l'échelle globale. Milliards, excuse-moi, j'ai dit, les chiffres sont un peu trop élevés. 2,5 milliards de tonnes d'émissions peuvent être déplacées en vendant notre gaz naturel en Inde. Donc, c'est ça notre but, c'est de réduire les émissions au niveau global tout en ramenant la production ici au Canada. Donc,
Thank you, folks.
beaucoup.
That concludes today's press conference.
Merci beaucoup, mes amis. Merci beaucoup.